School is in session. Let's play a game of Would You Rather. Would you rather go to these schools or these ones? Most of you would pick the first colorful one, right? Unfortunately, most schools around the country, and especially North Carolina, look like this due to underfunding. Across America, millions of students walk into classrooms that don't give them an equal chance of success. Why? Because our public school system is underfunded, and worse, the way it's funded is fundamentally broken. Let's break it down. Public schools are funded through a combination of local, state, and federal resources. State and local governments generally provide the majority of funding, with federal funding making up a smaller portion. Within the state, local school districts typically receive a portion of state funds, as well as funds raised locally through taxes. But here's the problem. Wealthy communities raise more money through property taxes, while poorer communities raise much less. This creates disparities between schools since schools in low-income areas are getting significantly less funding per student, even though their students are often needing more support, not less. This causes issues in class sizes, materials, teacher pay, and student outcomes. So what about when the economy takes a hit? These schools are the first to suffer. In 2007, the Great Recession hit. By 2009, the states slashed education budgets to balance their books. It took schools until 2015 to recover their pre-recession funding levels. But for many poor districts, the recovery never really came. They stayed behind, forced to make do with less staff, older facilities, and larger class sizes. And here's the kicker. If the federal government played a stronger role, these local disparities could be smoothed out with consistent, equitable funding. But right now, federal funding only makes up about 8% of K-12 education dollars. So why hasn't the court fixed it? Well, most states are only legally required to provide an adequate education, not an equal one. But guess what? There's no clear definition of what adequate even means. So, in many states, it's perfectly legal for one district to receive thousands more per student than another, as long as both meet this vague standard of adequate. Let's zoom in on North Carolina, one of the lowest ranked states for school funding. North Carolina has been ranked 48th in funding level and 49th in funding effort. Funding level is the amount of state and local funding available proportionate to each student, adjusted for cost of living. Funding effort is the state and local funding proportionate to the gross GDP of the state, which is the estimated value of goods and services produced in a state. Essentially, North Carolina is a state that produces a lot of revenue and tax dollars as a result of the amount of large businesses here, and yet our public schools are proportionately not funded nearly enough. Special education is hit especially hard because North Carolina uses a dollar allotment per identified student with a funding cap, meaning once a district hits a certain number of students, they stop receiving funds even if they are still needed. While this funding cap was created to reduce over-identification, it establishes many disparities in special education resources across districts because it means the kids over the cap won't get the help and resources they need. From 2005 to 2017, 62% of NC schools faced underfunding, with some districts needing to cover 37% of costs with local funds, just to meet basic needs. What's another side effect of underfunding? Teacher shortages. Since the pandemic, vacancies have exploded, from 36,000 to 55,000 open positions. That's not all. Over 270,000 classrooms are now led by underqualified or out-of-field teachers, like a PE teacher turned history teacher. While some states are starting to present more information on teacher vacancies to help guide policy decisions, an Education Week report by Madeline Will states that currently not all states report their vacancy numbers or at least don't update them, as we can see in this map, which means these numbers could be higher. Teachers are overworked, underpaid, and expected to do more with less. And students? They suffer the consequences, especially in rural or low-income districts. These money shortages cause larger class sizes, limited resources, and overall impact students' academic achievement, leading to issues such as intense academic struggle and an increased likelihood of dropout. But there's a bright spot: universal school meals. Within the last decade, starting with the 2010 Community Eligibility Provision, or CEP, and the federal policy of all students eating free school lunch that was created due to the COVID-19 pandemic, attention has been brought to how beneficial these are, and growing support has been created for universal free school meals. Plus, testimonials from teachers, parents, and students from many schools like West Elementary and Butte advocate that these free meals help with behavior, reduce food insecurity, improve school performance, and most importantly, eliminate lunch shaming for students with unpaid lunch debt, especially in low-income communities. And this access to these meals reduces so much stress for many families. So, as we can see, there are many benefits to the system. However, during COVID-19, the Trump administration allowed all students to receive free meals, which isn't a problem, but when the program ended in 2022, many districts returned to charging for meals. This showed the rising cost of universal school meals, leading many lawmakers to argue that state funds should not be used to provide meals to children from wealthier families. Still, research shows the benefit far outweighs the cost, especially in closing the achievement gap. Unfortunately, all these issues have the potential to get worse if the Department of Education collapses, which might be underway as our current president is attempting to dismantle a system that determines how education is funded. The Department of Education was created in 1980 after the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare were reorganized into separate entities. Its definition states that the Department of Education is a cabinet-level executive branch agency responsible for overseeing education policy and administering funding for programs and individuals. Basically, the department's function is to promote educational equity for all students and provide grants and loans to higher education institutions and students. So, as you can see, this system affects our ability to be in school as college students who usually live off loans and scholarships. Now, imagine how much worse the overall public education system would get if this system fails. Overall, the evidence is very clear: when schools are underfunded, students suffer, and it doesn't have to be this way. Stronger federal support, more equitable state laws, universal access to basic needs like food and qualified teachers would help this issue so that every child can get a fair chance no matter their zip code. Let's fix public school funding and give all students the future they deserve.